The stench of smoke hung in the air as Vivian Sutton stood amid the smoldering ruins of what had once been her family's ranch, her amber eyes reflecting the dying embers that had consumed everything she'd ever known. The fire had been merciless, sweeping through the property with a vengeance that left nothing but ash and broken dreams in its wake. Colorado Territory, 1875, a year that would forever be etched in her memory as the moment her life crumbled to dust. "Pa would have wanted me to be strong," she whispered to herself, clutching the silver locket that had somehow survived the inferno, the only keepsake she had left of her parents. At 22, Vivian had already endured more tragedy than most faced in a lifetime. First, the fever that took her mother 3 years ago, and now this devastating fire that claimed her father while he slept. Tears streamed down her soot-stained face as she sank to her knees in the dirt. The ranch had been struggling since her mother's passing, but her father had worked tirelessly to keep it afloat. Now, with both parents gone and the property destroyed, Vivian was truly alone. "Miss Sutton," a deep voice called from behind her. She turned to see Sheriff Daniels approaching, his weathered face etched with concern. "I'm mighty sorry about your pa and the ranch. The fire spread faster than anyone could have anticipated." "You know what caused it?" Vivian asked, her voice barely audible. The sheriff removed his hat, twisting it in his hands. "Can't say for certain, but Jenkins mentioned seeing strangers riding away just before the flames started. Could have been an accident, could have been." He trailed off, not wanting to voice his suspicions. "Could have been the Kessler gang," Vivian finished for him, her voice hardening. The notorious outlaws had been terrorizing ranches throughout the territory, and her father had openly spoken against them at town meetings. "We're looking into it," Sheriff Daniels assured her. "In the meantime, Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house has offered you a room." Vivian nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the charred remnants of her childhood home. "Thank you, Sheriff." After he left, Vivian remained among the ruins until sunset, gathering what little she could salvage. As darkness descended, she reluctantly made her way to Aspen's modest boarding house, each step heavier than the last. The following morning, Vivian sat in the bank manager's office, the cold reality of her situation settling in her stomach like lead. "I'm afraid there's no easy way to say this, Miss Sutton," Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his spectacles. "Your father had taken out a substantial loan against the property. With the ranch destroyed and no insurance, I'm afraid there's nothing left." "Nothing," Vivian echoed, her voice hollow. "The land itself still holds some value, but not enough to cover the debt. I'm sorry, but the bank will have to take possession." Vivian stared at her hands, calloused from years of ranch work. "I understand." With nowhere to go and no money to her name, Vivian found herself at the Aspen General Store later that day, selling her mother's silver hairbrush, one of the few items she'd rescued from the fire. "This is mighty fine craftsmanship," said Mrs. Turner, the storekeeper's wife. "I can give you $15 for it." "That's very fair, thank you," Vivian replied, swallowing the lump in her throat as she handed over the precious heirloom. As she exited the store, the $15 tucked safely in her pocket, Vivian collided with a solid mass of muscle and leather. "Whoa there," came a rich, baritone voice as strong hands steadied her. "You all right, madam?" Vivian looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a man she'd never encountered before, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his Stetson. "I'm fine," she said, stepping back. "Forgive me, I wasn't watching where I was going." "No harm done," the stranger replied with a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "Vaughn Kincaid at your service." "Vivian Sutton," she replied automatically, then frowned. "You're new to Aspen." Just arrived yesterday, he confirmed. Thought I might try my hand at ranching in these parts. A bitter laugh escaped Vivian's lips before she could stop it. I wouldn't recommend it. Vaughn's eyebrow arched with curiosity. That's so. This town has a way of taking everything from you, she said, unable to mask the pain in her voice. Before Vaughn could respond, Mrs. Peterson from the boarding house approached, her expression sympathetic. Vivian, dear, I was just looking for you. I hate to do this, but with the summer travelers coming in, I'll need your room by the end of the week. I understand, Vivian assured her, though panic fluttered in her chest. Where would she go? After Mrs. Peterson left, Vivian became acutely aware of Vaughn's presence. Well, Mr. Kincaid, welcome to Aspen. I hope it treats you better than it has me. She turned to leave, her shoulders slumped with the weight of her circumstances. Wait, Vaughn called after her. I couldn't help but overhear. Are you in some kind of trouble? Vivian hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Nothing I can't handle. I've always found that troubles shared or troubles halved, Vaughn said, his voice kind but not pitying, a distinction that made all the difference to Vivian. Against her better judgment, Vivian found herself sitting with Vaughn at a table outside the town's modest cafe, recounting the events that had left her destitute. So that's it, she concluded, staring into her cup of coffee, a luxury purchased with Vaughn's money that she'd initially refused. The ranch is gone, my father is dead, and I have $15 to my name. Vaughn listened without interruption, his blue eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that surprised her. I'm truly sorry for your loss, Miss Sutton. Thank you, she said quietly. But sympathy won't rebuild a ranch or bring back the dead. No, Vaughn agreed, it won't, but perhaps opportunity might ease the path forward. Vivian looked at him questioningly. I came to Aspen to purchase land for ranching, Vaughn explained. I've been saving for years, working cattle drives from Texas to Montana. I know horses, cattle, and how to make a ranch profitable. Good for you, Vivian said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. I wish you better luck than we had. What if we combined forces? Vaughn suggested, leaning forward. I have the capital but lack local knowledge. You know this land better than anyone. Vivian laughed incredulously. Mr. Kincaid, we've only just met. For all I know, you could be as bad as the Kessler gang. Fair point, he conceded with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. But I'm staying at the boarding house too. Ask around about me if you'd like. And what exactly are you proposing? Vivian asked cautiously. A partnership, Vaughn said simply. I buy the land, your land, from the bank. We rebuild together, split the profits evenly. Vivian's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would you offer such a thing to a stranger? Because I've been where you are, Vaughn said, his expression turning serious. Lost everything in a fire back in Kansas when I was 18. Had to start from nothing. He paused, studying her face. And because I recognize a fighter when I see one. Against her better judgment, Vivian felt a spark of hope ignite within her. And if I refuse, Vaughn shrugged, then I'll wish you well and seek land elsewhere. But I think we could do great things together, Miss Sutton. For the first time in days, Vivian allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't bleak and desperate. Still, caution prevailed. I'll think about it. True to her word, Vivian spent the next 2 days observing Vaughn from a distance and asking discreet questions around town. To her surprise, the reports were uniformly positive. Vaughn had already made a favorable impression on Aspen's residents with his straightforward manner and willingness to help. She'd watched him assist the blacksmith with a difficult horse and carry supplies for the elderly Mrs. Tanner without being asked. On the third morning, Vivian found Vaughn splitting wood behind the boarding house, his shirt damp with exertion. If we do this, she said without preamble, I want everything in writing, and I want a clause that allows me to buy you out eventually." Vaughn paused, resting his weight on the axe handle. A slow smile spread across his face. "Does this mean we have an agreement?" "It means I'm considering it," Vivian clarified. "But first, I want to know why you're really doing this." Men don't offer partnerships to women they've just met without an ulterior motive. Vaughn set the axe aside and wiped his brow. "My father always said opportunity doesn't knock twice. When I heard about your situation, I recognized a potential partner with the knowledge I lack." "It's as simple as that." "Nothing's ever that simple," Vivian countered. "Sometimes it is," Vaughn insisted. "Look, Miss Sutton, I have nothing to hide. I served in the Union Army, worked cattle drives for 10 years, saved every penny, and came west to build something of my own. I'm 30 years old and tired of working for other men's dreams." His frankness was disarming, and Vivian found herself wanting to believe him. It's a big if we do this. You should know I won't be a silent partner. I'll have equal say in all decisions." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Vaughn replied with a nod of respect. 2 days later, they stood before Mr. Harrison at the bank, signing papers that transferred ownership of the Sutton Ranch to a newly formed partnership between Vaughn Kincaid and Vivian Sutton. "Are you sure about this, Vivian?" Mr. Harrison asked with concern. "It's highly unusual for a young woman to enter into such an arrangement with a man she hardly knows." "I'm sure," Vivian replied firmly, though her hand trembled slightly as she signed the documents. She had never imagined her life taking such a turn, but with no alternatives and winter approaching, Vivian chose to place her trust in this stranger with kind eyes and calloused hands. As they left the bank, legal partners in a venture that seemed equal parts madness and hope, Vivian felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Well, partner," Vaughn said, tipping his hat to her, "shall we go see what's left of our ranch, The words sounded foreign to Vivian's ears, but not entirely unwelcome. The journey to the ranch was sobering. Though only 5 miles from town, each step brought Vivian closer to the scene of her greatest loss. As they crested the final hill on horseback, Vivian, on a gentle mare borrowed from the livery stable, the full extent of the devastation came into view. The main house was nothing but a blackened skeleton. The barn had partially survived, its eastern wall and roof still intact. The corral fences were damaged but salvageable, and the well appeared undisturbed. The land itself, nearly 200 acres of rolling pasture backed by pine forest, remained as beautiful as ever, indifferent to the human tragedy that had unfolded upon it. Vaughn dismounted and surveyed the property with a critical eye. "The location is good, close to water, good grazing land, access to timber." He turned to Vivian. "Your father chose well. This land has been in our family for 3 generations, Vivian said softly. "My grandfather settled here after the gold rush of '59. Vaughn nodded respectfully. "Then we'll honor that legacy by bringing it back to life." He walked toward the barn, examining what remained. "We can salvage these beams. The foundation of the house looks solid. We can rebuild on it." His practical assessment helped Vivian focus on the future rather than the painful past. "The north pasture has the best grass for grazing. We lost our small herd in the fire, but with proper management, this land could support twice what we had." As they walked the property together, Vivian gradually shifted from seeing the ghosts of what had been to envisioning what could be. Vaughn listened attentively to her knowledge of the land, asking questions and offering suggestions that revealed his expertise in ranching operations. "We'll need to clear this debris and start on the barn first," Vaughn said as the sun began to set. "With winter coming, shelter for ourselves and eventual livestock is the priority." Ourselves? Vivian questioned, suddenly realizing the implication of their arrangement. Vaughn met her gaze directly. I assumed we'd both live on the property. It's the practical thing to do. Mr. Kincaid, Vivian said stiffly, while I may have entered into a business arrangement with you, I have no intention of compromising my reputation. I meant no disrespect, Vaughn clarified quickly. I thought we could rebuild the main house with separate quarters, or I could construct a small cabin for myself until the house is complete. Vivian's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Of course, that would be suitable. Good, Vaughn said with a nod. Now, shall we head back to town? We have supplies to order and workers to hire if we're to make progress before the first snow. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Using Vaughn's capital, they purchased lumber, tools, and hired local men to help clear the debris and begin construction. Vivian found herself impressed by Vaughn's work ethic and business acumen. He negotiated fair prices with suppliers, treated the workers with respect, and worked alongside them from dawn until dusk. By mid-October, the barn was fully repaired, and a small cabin had been constructed for Vaughn. The foundation for the main house had been cleared, and framing had begun. Vaughn had also purchased a small herd of cattle and 2 working horses to begin restocking the ranch. Vivian continued to stay at the boarding house in town, but rode out to the property daily to oversee the work and contribute her labor. Despite initial skepticism from the townsfolk about their unusual partnership, respect grew as they witnessed the ranch's transformation. On a crisp autumn morning, Vivian arrived at the property to find Vaughn already hard at work on the main house, hammering support beams into place. "Morning," he called out, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cool air. "Coffee's hot in the barn." Vivian tied her horse and made her way to the barn, where a pot of coffee sat on a small stove they'd installed. As she poured herself a cup, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Stepping outside, she saw 3 riders approaching one she recognized immediately as Bill Kessler, the leader of the gang suspected of setting the fire that killed her father. Her blood ran cold. "Vaughn," she called out, her voice tight with warning. He was already moving toward her, his expression alert. "Friends of yours?" he asked quietly. "Hardly," Vivian replied, her hand instinctively moving to the revolver she now carried at her hip, a gift from Vaughn, who had insisted she learn to protect herself. The riders stopped several yards away, Kessler in the lead. He was a thick-set man with a cruel mouth and small, calculating eyes. Well, he drawled. "Looks like the Sutton place is seeing some improvements. Didn't think we'd see anyone rebuilding after that unfortunate fire." "What do you want, Kessler?" Vivian demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Kessler's eyes narrowed at her direct address. "Just being neighborly, Miss Sutton, introducing myself to the newcomer." He shifted his gaze to Vaughn. "Word is you've sunk a lot of money into this place. Shame if something were to happen to it again." "That sounds remarkably like a threat," Vaughn replied calmly, though Vivian noticed his stance had shifted, ready for trouble. Kessler laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Take it how you will. Just thought you should know that ranching in these parts can be hazardous. Many folks find it easier to sell their land to me at a reasonable price rather than face the difficulties." "We're not interested in selling," Vaughn stated firmly. "Your funeral," Kessler shrugged. "Or should I say your father's funeral?" He directed this last comment at Vivian with a malicious smile. Before Vivian could react, Vaughn stepped forward. "I suggest you leave our property now while you still can." Something in Vaughn's tone, a quiet deadliness, made Kessler hesitate. He studied Vaughn more carefully, perhaps recognizing for the first time that this wasn't some naive Easterner he could easily intimidate. "We'll be seeing you around," Kessler said finally, turning his horse. As the three men rode away, he called back, "Winter's coming." Lots of things can go wrong in a Colorado winter. When they were out of sight, Vivian released a shaky breath. "They killed my father," she said with certainty. "I know they did." Vaughn's expression was grim. Men like that prey on fear. They count on people being too afraid to stand against them. "And you're not afraid?" Vivian asked, studying his face. "I've faced worse," Vaughn replied simply. Then, with a gentler tone, he added, "But I understand if this changes things for you. Our agreement didn't include fighting off land grabbers." Vivian straightened her spine. "This is my family's land, Mr. Kincaid. If Kessler thinks I'll abandon it now, he's sorely mistaken." A smile of approval crossed Vaughn's face. "Then we stand together." That night, Vivian returned to town later than usual, her mind preoccupied with Kessler's threats. As she entered the boarding house, Mrs. Peterson approached her with concern. "Vivian, dear, Sheriff Daniels was looking for you earlier. He seemed quite urgent." Vivian found the sheriff at his office, despite the late hour. His expression confirmed her worst fears before he spoke. "Miss Sutton, we found evidence that the fire at your ranch was deliberately set," he said without preamble. "A witness has come forward, one of Kessler's men who had a falling out with the gang. He's willing to testify that Kessler ordered the fire because your father refused to sell." Vivian's hands clenched into fists. "I knew it," she whispered. "Will you arrest him?" Sheriff Daniels sighed. "That's where it gets complicated. The witness disappeared this morning, left a note saying he feared for his life and was heading to Denver without his testimony. He trailed off apologetically. So Kessler gets away with murder," Vivian said bitterly. "For now," the sheriff conceded. "But I wanted to warn you. If Kessler targeted your father, he might come after you next, especially now that you're rebuilding." "He already paid us a visit today," Vivian informed him, recounting the encounter. The sheriff's expression darkened. "Be careful, Miss Sutton. Kessler doesn't make idle threats. And your new partner, what do you really know about him?" "Enough to trust him with my life," Vivian replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "When had that happened?" The following morning, Vivian rode out to the ranch at dawn, determined not to let fear dictate her actions. She found Vaughn already awake, checking the new cattle in the corral. "Vaughn," she called, dismounting. "Sheriff Daniels confirmed that Kessler was behind the fire that killed my father." Vaughn's expression hardened as she relayed the details. "We'll need to be vigilant," he said when she finished. "I'll speak with some of the men about taking shifts to watch the property at night." "Is that enough?" Vivian asked, frustration evident in her voice. "Kessler killed my father and destroyed everything I had. Now he's threatening to do it again, and we're just supposed to." "Wait, what are you suggesting?" Vaughn asked carefully. Vivian hesitated, then said, "I don't know, but doing nothing feels like letting him win." Vaughn was quiet for a moment, then said, "There's a difference between doing nothing and being patient. Justice doesn't always come swiftly, but it does come." "You sound like you speak from experience," Vivian observed. A shadow passed over Vaughn's features. "Perhaps I do." He changed the subject. "Come see the progress on the house. The men worked late yesterday, and the framing is nearly complete." As they walked toward the construction site, Vivian was struck by how much had been accomplished in such a short time. The skeleton of a substantial two-story home now stood where once there had been only ashes. "It's bigger than our original house," she noted. "I hope you don't mind," Vaughn said. "I thought with the partnership and potential for growth, we might need the extra space." Vivian wandered through the framed rooms, envisioning how they would look completed. "This is where the parlor was," she murmured, stopping in what would be a spacious front room. "My mother's piano stood by this window. She loved to play in the evenings while Pa smoked his pipe." Vaughn watched her with an unreadable expression. "We could get another piano when the time comes." Vivian shook her head. "It wouldn't be the same." She moved to another room. "This will be the kitchen." "Yes, with a large hearth here," Vaughn indicated. "The pantry will be through that door, and I've designed a cold storage room on the north side." His attention to detail impressed Vivian. "You've put a lot of thought into this." "I want to do it right," Vaughn said simply. "This isn't just a business venture for me anymore." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that their partnership had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Vivian looked away first, uncomfortable with the warmth spreading through her chest. "I should check on the vegetable garden I started," she said, moving toward the door. "Vivian," Vaughn called after her. When she turned, he said, "I meant what I said about standing together against Kessler. You're not alone in this." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly, before heading outside to hide the unexpected tears that threatened to fall. That evening, as Vivian prepared to return to town, Vaughn approached her with a proposition. "Winter's coming on fast," he said, gesturing toward the darkening sky where snow clouds gathered. "The roads to town will soon be difficult to traverse daily. Have you considered moving onto the property sooner?" Vivian frowned. "The house won't be ready for months." "No, but we could convert part of the barn into temporary living quarters for you," Vaughn suggested. "It's warm, secure, and would save you the daily journey." "And my reputation?" Vivian asked, though with less conviction than before. Vaughn smiled slightly. "I think the good people of Aspen have become accustomed to our unusual arrangement by now. Besides, we'll maintain separate quarters, and Mrs. Turner has volunteered to visit regularly to help with womanly matters." Her words, not mine. Vivian couldn't help but laugh. The storekeeper's wife had indeed taken a motherly interest in her welfare since the fire. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I try to," Vaughn admitted. "The truth is, I'd rest easier knowing you were here at night. With Kessler making threats, having you alone in town concerns me." His concern touched her, though she was loath to admit it. "I'll think about it," she promised. The decision was made for her the next morning when Aspen awoke to 6 inches of snow and more falling rapidly. Vaughn arrived at the boarding house with a wagon, already loaded with supplies. "First big snow of the season," he announced. "If we don't leave now, we might not make it to the ranch at all." Vivian hurriedly packed her few belongings. Within the hour, they were on the road, the wagon creaking through the freshly fallen snow. The journey, usually less than an hour, took nearly 3 as the horses struggled through deepening drifts. By the time they reached the ranch, the snow was knee-deep and still falling. They worked quickly to unload the wagon and settle the horses in the barn. Vaughn had indeed prepared for her arrival, partitioning off a corner of the barn with canvas walls to create a private room complete with a small stove, cot, chest, and even a rocking chair salvaged from town. "It's not much," Vaughn apologized, "but it should be comfortable enough until the house is finished." Vivian was touched by his thoughtfulness. "It's perfect for now," she assured him. "Thank you." That night, as the snow continued to fall and the wind howled around the barn, Vivian lay in her cot listening to the occasional shifting of the cattle and the steady breathing of Vaughn from his own quarters across the barn. Despite the circumstances, she felt an unexpected sense of peace, a feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be. The following weeks established a new rhythm to their lives. Snowbound at the ranch, Vivian and Vaughn worked side by side from dawn until dusk, caring for the animals, continuing construction on the house when weather permitted, and preparing for the long winter ahead. To Vivian's surprise, she found herself enjoying Vaughn's company more than she cared to admit. His quiet strength and unwavering resolve reminded her of her father. Yet there was something distinctly different about him, a gentleness beneath the rugged exterior that emerged in unexpected moments. One evening, as they sat by the stove in the barn sharing a simple meal of stew and cornbread, Vivian finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "You said you lost everything in a fire when you were 18. What happened?" Vaughn was silent for so long that Vivian thought he might not answer. Finally, he set down his bowl and looked into the flames. "I grew up on a small farm in Kansas," he began, his voice low. "My parents, younger sister, and me, we weren't wealthy, but we were happy. Then the war came. I was 17 when I enlisted in the Union Army." Vivian listened intently as he continued. "I was gone for nearly 2 years. When I finally returned home in '65, I found our farm had been raided by Confederate guerrillas. They'd burned everything to the ground." His voice became strained. "My parents and sister were inside the house when it happened." "Oh, Vaughn," Vivian whispered, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "I'm so sorry." He turned his palm upward, briefly squeezing her fingers before releasing them. "It was a long time ago." "Is that why you understood what I meant that day in town? When I said Aspen takes everything from you?" Vaughn nodded. "When I saw you standing there, so defiant despite having lost everything. It reminded me of myself at that age. The difference is, I had no one to help me start over." "And yet you did," Vivian observed. "Start over, I mean." "Eventually," Vaughn confirmed. "It took years of drifting, working any job I could find. The cattle drive saved me in a way, gave me purpose, taught me skills, helped me save money, but it was a lonely life." The vulnerability in his admission made Vivian see Vaughn in a new light. His offer of partnership hadn't been merely business, it had been born of genuine understanding, and perhaps a desire to provide the help he'd never received. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. Vaughn's gaze held hers. "We're partners, Vivian. Partners should know each other's stories." The next morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. They worked together to break the ice on the water troughs and ensure the animals were comfortable before turning their attention to the house. "If this weather holds, we might get the roof completed before the next storm," Vaughn said, surveying their progress. "The men from town should be able to make it out today." As predicted, by mid-morning the workers arrived and construction resumed at full pace. Vivian worked alongside them, helping to hoist beams and secure roofing materials. By sunset, the roof was nearly complete, and the windows had been installed on the first floor. "Another day like this, and we'll have the house enclosed before the next snow," Vaughn said with satisfaction as they watched the workers depart. They were walking back to the barn when Vivian noticed smoke rising from the far pasture. "Vaughn," she said urgently, pointing. Without hesitation, Vaughn sprinted toward the stable, Vivian close behind. They saddled horses in record time and rode hard toward the smoke, reaching the source in minutes. A section of their fence had been broken down, and a small fire had been set against a stand of dry trees. Fortunately, the snow had prevented it from spreading significantly. "This was deliberate," Vaughn said grimly, dismounting to stamp out the remaining flames. "Kessler," Vivian confirmed, her voice tight with anger. "Look." She pointed to tracks in the snow leading away from their property. "At least 3 riders," Vaughn observed, studying the prints. "They wanted us to see this a warning." "I'm tired of warnings," Vivian declared, her patience finally snapping. "We need to take this to Sheriff Daniels." "We will," Vaughn agreed, "but don't expect much. Tracks and a small fire won't be enough to move against Kessler." They reported the incident to the sheriff the following day when he rode out to check on them. But as Vaughn had predicted, little could be done without concrete evidence linking Kessler to the vandalism. Keep your eyes open, Sheriff Daniels advised. And maybe consider selling after all. No piece of land is worth your lives. After he left, Vivian paced the barn in frustration. Why does everyone just accept that Kessler can terrorize honest people? Why won't anyone stand against him? Fear is a powerful motivator, Vaughn said quietly. And Kessler has cultivated it well. Well, I'm not afraid of him, Vivian declared. Vaughn's expression was serious. You should be. Men like Kessler are dangerous precisely because they have nothing to lose. We, on the other hand, have created something worth protecting. His words gave Vivian pause. He was right. In just a few short months, they had rebuilt much of what had been destroyed. The ranch was coming back to life, their small herd was healthy, and the house would soon be habitable. They had indeed created something worth protecting. So what do? She asked, her anger giving way to pragmatism. We stay vigilant, but we don't let fear stop us from building what we've started, Vaughn replied. And we make it clear to Kessler and anyone watching that we won't be intimidated. The opportunity to demonstrate this resolve came sooner than expected. 3 days later, as they worked on finishing the interior walls of the house, they heard the approach of multiple horses. Vaughn and Vivian exchanged a glance before stepping outside to find Kessler and 5 of his men riding onto their property. "Afternoon," Kessler called out with mock friendliness. "Thought we'd stop by to see how you're faring after that little fire the other day." "We're faring just fine," Vaughn replied evenly, positioning himself slightly in front of Vivian, a protective gesture she might have resented under different circumstances. "Glad to hear it," Kessler said, dismounting. His men remained on horseback, their hands resting near their weapons. "Though I can't help wondering why you're being so stubborn about this place. There's plenty of land elsewhere that doesn't come with such complications." "This land isn't for sale," Vivian stated firmly, stepping forward to stand beside Vaughn. "Not now, not ever." Kessler's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything's for sale for the right price, Miss Sutton. Your father learned that the hard way." The admission of guilt was spoken so casually that it momentarily stunned Vivian. Before she could react, Vaughn's hand closed around her wrist, a silent warning to remain calm. "You're trespassing, Kessler," Vaughn said, his voice deceptively calm. "I suggest you leave," Kessler laughed. "Or what, you'll call the sheriff. He knows better than to interfere with my business." "No," Vaughn replied. "I won't call the sheriff." With his free hand, he pulled back his coat to reveal the revolver at his hip. "But I will defend what's mine." The tension in the air thickened as Kessler's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. 6 against 2 isn't very sporting," Kessler observed. "True," came a new voice from behind them. "So how about we even the odds?" Vivian turned to see 3 of their ranch hands emerging from the barn, rifles raised. Sheriff Daniels rode in from the road, accompanied by 2 deputies. "Afternoon, Kessler," the sheriff called out. "Funny finding you here. I've been looking for you regarding some outstanding warrants from Denver." Kessler's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake, Daniels." "The only mistake was thinking you could operate freely in my jurisdiction," the sheriff replied. "Now, you and your men can come peacefully, or we can do this the hard way." For a tense moment, Vivian thought Kessler would choose violence. Then, with a forced laugh, he raised his hands. "No need for bloodshed today. We were just having a friendly conversation." "I bet," Sheriff Daniels said dryly. "Boys, relieve Mr. Kessler and his friends of their weapons." As the deputies moved forward, Kessler's eyes locked with Vivian's. "This isn't over," he promised quietly. "For now, it is," the sheriff countered, having overheard. "You're looking at a stay in my jail while I sort out these warrants." After Kessler and his men were led away, Vivian turned to Vaughn. "Did you know the sheriff was coming?" Vaughn nodded. I sent word to him after we spotted the tracks leading to town. Figured Kessler might make a move soon. Thank you, Vivian said simply. Partners stand together, Vaughn reminded her with a slight smile. That evening, with the immediate threat contained, they celebrated with a special dinner in the barn. The ranch hands joined them, and for the first time since her father's death, Vivian felt the warmth of community and belonging. As the men departed for their quarters, leaving Vivian and Vaughn alone by the stove, she found herself studying his profile in the firelight. The past months had changed him, or perhaps just her perception of him. No longer the stranger who had offered an unexpected lifeline, Vaughn had become something much more significant in her life. "What are you thinking?" Vaughn asked, catching her gaze. Vivian considered deflecting the question but opted for honesty instead. "I was thinking about how much has changed since we met, how different my life might have been without your intervention." "You give me too much credit," Vaughn said. "You're the strongest person I know, Vivian. You would have found your way with or without me." "Perhaps," she conceded, "but I'm grateful it was with you." The admission cost her some pride, but the smile it earned from Vaughn was worth it. "As am I," he replied softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotion. Vivian found herself wanting to close the distance between them but hesitated, uncertain of the boundaries in their evolving relationship. Vaughn seemed to sense her conflict. He stood and stretched, breaking the tension. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day if we want to finish the downstairs rooms before Christmas." Vivian nodded, both relieved and disappointed. "Good night, Vaughn." "Good night, Vivian," he replied, his voice warm with affection that made her heart beat faster as she retreated to her quarters. The following weeks were indeed busy, with work on the house progressing rapidly, despite occasional snowstorms. By mid-December, the downstairs was fully enclosed and functional, with a working kitchen, parlor, and 2 bedrooms completed. "I think it's time you moved into the house," Vaughn said one evening as they inspected their work. "The bedroom on the east side is finished, and it's far warmer than the barn." Vivian ran her hand along the freshly painted wall. "What about you?" "I'll stay in the barn until the upstairs is complete," Vaughn replied. "It's only proper." Vivian found herself strangely disappointed by his insistence on propriety, though she knew it was for the best. "Very well. I'll move my things tomorrow." Christmas approached with a festive atmosphere, despite their remote location. Vaughn surprised Vivian by bringing home a small pine tree, which they set up in the parlor and decorated with paper stars, dried berries, and a few precious glass ornaments purchased from the general store during their last trip to town. On Christmas Eve, Vivian prepared a special dinner, using skills learned from her mother to create a feast from their modest supplies. They dined in the new kitchen, the table set with Vivian's salvaged china and illuminated by candlelight. "This is wonderful," Vaughn said appreciatively as he savored the roast venison and apple pie. "You're a remarkable cook, Vivian," she blushed at the compliment. "My mother taught me. She believed a proper meal could lift the spirits even in the darkest times." "A wise woman," Vaughn agreed. "She would be proud of what you've accomplished here." After dinner, they moved to the parlor where Vaughn had built a roaring fire. To Vivian's surprise, he produced a small package from his coat pocket. "Merry Christmas," he said, offering it to her. "Vaughn, you shouldn't have," Vivian protested, though she accepted the gift with trembling fingers. Unwrapping it carefully, she gasped at the contents, a delicate silver hairpin adorned with a small pearl. "It reminded me of you," Vaughn explained. "Strong yet elegant." Tears pricked Vivian's eyes. "It's beautiful, but I didn't get you anything." "You've given me more than you know," Vaughn said softly. "A purpose, a home, hope." The sincerity in his voice made Vivian's heart swell with emotion. Acting on impulse, she moved closer and gently placed her hand on his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Vaughn's eyes darkened as he covered her hand with his own. "Vivian," he murmured, her name a question and a plea all at once. She answered by closing the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with months of unspoken longing. Vaughn's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as she melted against him. When they finally parted, both breathless, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. "Why did you wait so long?" Vivian asked, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I needed you to see me as a man you could trust, not just a business partner," Vaughn explained. "And I wanted to be worthy of you." "You are," Vivian assured him. "More than worthy." They spent the remainder of Christmas Eve by the fire, talking and sharing occasional kisses, learning each other in this new, intimate way. As the hour grew late, Vaughn reluctantly stood to leave for the barn. "Stay," Vivian said impulsively, then blushed at her boldness. "I mean, the parlor is warm and the snow is getting worse." Vaughn smiled but shook his head. "As much as I want to, I respect you too much to risk your reputation. When I stay, it will be as your husband if you'll have me." The word hung in the air between them, husband, with all its implications and promises. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. "Are you asking me to marry you, Vaughn Kincaid?" "Not yet," Vaughn replied with a gentle smile. "When I do, it will be done properly, with a ring and on bended knee." "But soon, Vivian. Very soon." He kissed her once more, tenderly, before donning his coat and braving the snowy night to return to the barn. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching his figure disappear into the swirling snow, her heart fuller than she'd ever thought possible. From the depths of loss and despair, she had found not just recovery, but something infinitely precious: love. The new year of 1876 dawned bright and cold, bringing with it renewed purpose for the ranch. With Kessler temporarily contained, the sheriff had managed to hold him on lesser charges while building a case for more serious ones. Vivian and Vaughn focused on expanding their operation. They purchased additional cattle and hired more hands to manage the growing herd. The house was completed by February, a testament to their hard work and vision. True to his word, Vaughn continued to sleep in the barn, though he spent his evenings with Vivian in the house, their relationship deepening with each passing day. By spring, the ranch was flourishing. Green grass covered the pastures, new calves strengthened their herd, and the vegetable garden Vivian had planted provided fresh produce for their table. They had even added a chicken coop and a small orchard of apple and cherry trees. On a particularly beautiful April evening, Vaughn suggested a ride to the western edge of their property, where a small hill overlooked a meadow bursting with wildflowers. "It's breathtaking," Vivian said as they dismounted to watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Not as breathtaking as you," Vaughn replied, taking her hand and leading her to a flat stone perfect for sitting. As they settled side by side, Vivian noticed Vaughn seemed unusually nervous. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Better than all right," he assured her, then took a deep breath. "Vivian, these past months have been the happiest of my life. When I came to Aspen, I was looking for land to build a ranch, but I found something far more valuable." He shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I found you a woman of incredible strength, intelligence, and beauty. A woman who has become not just my partner but my best friend, my confidante, and the keeper of my heart." Vivian's eyes widened as Vaughn released her hands only to reach into his pocket and withdraw a small velvet box. As promised months earlier, he lowered himself to one knee before her. "Vivian Sutton, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to spend every day of our lives ensuring that you never regret saying yes." Tears of joy spilled down Vivian's cheeks as Vaughn opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond flanked by sapphires that matched his eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Vaughn, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her into his arms, spinning her in a circle that sent her laughing into the evening air. When he set her down, his kiss was filled with such promise and devotion that Vivian felt her heart might burst with happiness. "I love you, Vivian Sutton," Vaughn declared when they finally parted. "I think I've loved you since that first day in town when you collided with me and then promptly warned me against ranching." Vivian laughed at the memory. "And I love you, Vaughn Kincaid, even though you didn't listen to my warning." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured, pulling her close again. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the newly built church in Aspen. The entire town turned out for the occasion, their initial skepticism about the unusual partnership having given way to admiration for what Vaughn and Vivian had accomplished together. Mrs. Turner wept openly as Vivian walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, ordered specially from Denver. Vaughn, resplendent in a new black suit, watched his bride approach with such undisguised adoration that several of the town's young women sighed wistfully. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard beneath flowering apple trees. Lanterns hung from branches, casting a warm glow as dusk fell, and a local fiddler provided music for dancing. As Vaughn led Vivian in their first dance as husband and wife, he pulled her close and whispered, "Happy." "Completely," she assured him, her eyes shining with love. "Though I can think of one thing that would make this day even more perfect." "What's that, Mrs. Kincaid?" Vaughn asked, delighting in using her new name. Vivian blushed slightly, then whispered in his ear, "Taking you home as my husband." Vaughn's step faltered momentarily, his eyes darkening with desire. "Perhaps we should bid our guests good night a bit earlier than planned." They managed to wait until the moon was high before thanking their guests and retreating to their house, now truly shared as husband and wife. The bedroom Vaughn had never entered was prepared for their wedding night, with fresh linens and wildflowers in a vase by the bed. As the door closed behind them, Vivian felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. Despite their months of growing closeness, this final intimacy remained uncharted territory. Vaughn seemed to sense her nerves. "We have all the time in the world," he assured her, gently taking her hands in his. "There's no rush." His consideration only deepened Vivian's love for him. Rising on tiptoe, she kissed him with newfound boldness, letting her actions convey what words could not. What followed was a night of tender discoveries and passionate affirmations, as two souls who had found each other amid loss and hardship sealed their bond in the most ancient of ways. In Vaughn's arms, Vivian found a sanctuary she had never known existed, a place of complete acceptance and boundless love. As dawn broke over the ranch, Vivian awoke to find Vaughn watching her, his expression one of wonder and devotion. "What are you thinking?" she asked drowsily, nestling closer to his warmth. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "and that this is just the beginning of our story." Summer brought prosperity to the Kincaid Ranch. Their cattle fetched excellent prices at market, their crops thrived, and their reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread throughout the territory. They had become not just successful ranchers but respected members of the community, often hosting gatherings for neighboring families and contributing to local causes. In late August, as they celebrated their 4th month of marriage, Vivian received news that brought both joy and concern. Dr. Maxwell confirmed what she had begun to suspect: she was expecting a child, due in early spring. When she shared the news with Vaughn that evening, his initial jubilation was tempered with worry. "Are you well? Do you need anything? Perhaps we should hire more help around the house." Vivian laughed at his fussing. "I'm perfectly healthy, Vaughn. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, often while continuing to work much harder than I do." "Not my wife," Vaughn declared firmly. "You'll rest and be careful." His protective instincts only intensified as Vivian's pregnancy progressed. By winter, he had hired a young woman from town to help with household chores and insisted that Vivian delegate more of her ranch responsibilities to their capable foreman. Though she protested this coddling, privately Vivian was touched by Vaughn's concern. As her body changed and the reality of impending parenthood settled upon them, their bond deepened even further. Often, she would catch Vaughn watching her with an expression of such tender wonder that it brought tears to her eyes. Their peaceful existence was interrupted in January, when Sheriff Daniels arrived with troubling news. Bill Kessler had escaped custody while being transferred to Denver for trial and was rumored to be heading back to the Aspen area. "I've sent wires to neighboring towns and increased patrols," the sheriff assured them, "but you should be on alert. Kessler made some pretty specific threats against you both before he escaped." Vaughn's expression hardened. "Thank you for the warning. We'll take precautions." After the sheriff departed, Vaughn immediately implemented security measures. The ranch hands were organized into shifts to patrol the property day and night. Firearms were checked and kept loaded, and Vaughn insisted that Vivian never be alone, especially as her pregnancy advanced. "You think he'll really come after us?" Vivian asked one night as they prepared for bed, her hand resting protectively over her swollen abdomen. Vaughn's hesitation before answering told her more than his words. "I don't know, but I won't take chances with your safety or our child's." February brought heavy snows that isolated the ranch for days at a time. While the weather created hardships, it also provided a sense of security. If they couldn't easily leave the property, neither could potential threats approach undetected. By March, Vivian was in her final month of pregnancy and increasingly confined to the house. Spring was beginning to make tentative appearances, with patches of ground emerging from melting snow and the first green buds appearing on the trees. On a mild afternoon, while Vaughn was checking on the pregnant cows in the south pasture, Vivian sat in the parlor knitting a blanket for the baby. A movement outside the window caught her attention: a rider approaching from the direction of town. Expecting it to be the doctor, whom Vaughn had insisted on summoning for a routine check, Vivian set aside her knitting and moved to the door. As she opened it, the words of welcome died on her lips. Bill Kessler stood on her porch, his appearance even more unkempt than she remembered, his eyes burning with a hatred that made her instinctively step back. "Hello, Mrs. Kincaid," he said with mock politeness. "You're looking prosperous." Vivian's hand moved to her revolver, only to remember with horror that she had left it in the bedroom. "What do you want, Kessler?" "Justice," he spat, all pretense of civility vanishing. "Your husband and you cost me everything: my business, my reputation, nearly a year of my life in that hellhole of a jail. You cost yourself those things when you murdered my father and tried to steal our land," Vivian countered, trying to keep her voice steady as she assessed her options. The ranch hands were scattered across the property, and Vaughn was at least 20 minutes away. "That old man should have sold when he had the chance," Kessler growled. "Just like you should have before you brought your husband into this." As he spoke, Kessler moved forward, forcing Vivian to retreat into the house. She backed toward the kitchen, knowing Vaughn's shotgun was stored there. "Kessler, whatever you're planning, it won't end well for you," Vivian warned. "The sheriff knows you've escaped. He's looking for you." Kessler laughed harshly. "By the time he finds me, I'll be long gone. But first, I'm going to take from you what you took from me." His hand moved to the gun at his hip. Vivian's back hit the kitchen doorway. "You don't want to do this," she said, fighting to keep her voice level despite the fear coursing through her. "Murder will only ensure you hang when they catch you." "I'm already facing a hanging," Kessler replied coldly. "What's one more charge?" His eyes dropped to her pregnant belly. "Or two?" The threat to her unborn child ignited something primal in Vivian. As Kessler raised his gun, she lunged sideways into the kitchen, narrowly avoiding the shot that splintered the doorframe where she had stood. Scrambling toward the cabinet where Vaughn kept the shotgun, Vivian heard Kessler's heavy footsteps behind her. Her fingers closed around the cool metal just as a hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. Kessler's face twisted with rage as he raised his gun again. "End of the line, Mrs. Kincaid." In that moment, time seemed to slow. Vivian brought the shotgun up, her father's lessons in marksmanship guiding her movements despite her terror. The blast was deafening in the confined space of the kitchen, the recoil sending her stumbling backward against the counter. When the smoke cleared, Kessler lay motionless on the floor, a spreading crimson stain across his chest. Vivian stood frozen, the shotgun still clutched in trembling hands, until the sound of pounding hooves outside broke through her shock. "Vivian!" Vaughn's frantic voice called as he burst through the door, revolver drawn. He took in the scene in an instant: Kessler's body, the discharged shotgun, Vivian's pale face. "My God," he breathed, holstering his weapon and rushing to her side. "Are you hurt?" Vivian shook her head mutely, still staring at Kessler's lifeless form. Gently, Vaughn pried the shotgun from her rigid fingers and set it aside before enfolding her in his arms. "I heard the shot from the pasture," he explained, his voice rough with fear. "Vivian, look at me. Are you sure you're not injured?" Finally, tearing her gaze from Kessler, Vivian focused on her husband's concerned face. "He said he was going to kill me," she whispered. "And the baby. I had to." "You did what you had to do," Vaughn assured her, guiding her away from the kitchen and into the parlor. "He gave you no choice." As the initial shock began to fade, Vivian felt a different kind of pain, sharp and low in her abdomen. She gasped, clutching at Vaughn's arm. "The baby," she managed. I think it's coming." Vaughn's eyes widened with alarm. "Now, but it's too soon." "Not too soon," Vivian corrected through gritted teeth as another contraction gripped her. "Just unexpected timing." Moving with remarkable efficiency for a man just confronted with both a dead body and an imminent birth, Vaughn settled Vivian on their bed, before sending one of the ranch hands who had arrived at the sound of the gunshot to fetch the doctor and another to notify the sheriff. What followed was the most challenging and miraculous night of Vivian's life. As sheriff, Daniels dealt with Kessler's body and the inevitable questions that followed. Vivian labored to bring new life into the world. Vaughn remained by her side throughout, his steady presence anchoring her through waves of pain and fear. Just as dawn broke over the ranch, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "Doctor." Maxwell placed the squalling infant in Vivian's arms, his tiny face red with indignation at being thrust from his warm sanctuary into the bright, cold world. "He's perfect," Vaughn whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he gently touched his son's downy head. "Just like his mother." Exhausted but radiant, Vivian looked up at her husband. "What shall we call him?" Vaughn considered for a moment. "How about Thomas, after your father? Thomas Vaughn Kincaid." Fresh tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks at the gesture. "It's perfect," she agreed. Looking down at their son, who had quieted and now gazed up at them with unfocused eyes, Vivian felt a profound sense of completion. From the ashes of loss, a new family had risen stronger perhaps for having been forged in adversity. The days that followed were a blur of recovery, adjustments to parenthood, and official matters regarding Kessler's death. The inquest ruled it justifiable homicide in self-defense, closing the final chapter on the outlaw's reign of terror in the territory. Spring blossomed fully around the ranch, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed particularly appropriate. As Vivian sat in the rocking chair on the porch one evening, Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. Vaughn joined her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts," Vivian smiled up at him. "I was just thinking about the day we met, how utterly hopeless everything seemed then." "You've come a long way from that day in town when you warned me against ranching," Vaughn observed, his eyes twinkling. "We both have," Vivian agreed. "I never imagined then that losing everything would lead to gaining so much more." Vaughn knelt beside her chair, his expression serious despite his smile. "Do you remember what I said to you that day when you told me you'd lost everything?" Vivian nodded, the memory vivid despite the passage of time. "You said, then start over with me. That's enough." "And was it?" Vaughn asked softly. "Is it enough, this life we've built together?" Vivian gazed at her sleeping son, then at the flourishing ranch around them, and finally at the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. "It's more than enough," she whispered, reaching out to touch his face. "It's everything." As the sun set over their land, painting the mountains in gold and purple, Vaughn leaned in to kiss her a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future and all the gratitude for their hard-won present. In that perfect moment, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and love, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that from the deepest loss could come the greatest joy, if only one had the courage to begin again. In the years that followed, the Kincaid Ranch prospered beyond their early dreams. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. He was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, 2 years later, and another brother, James, 2 years after that. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, with a new wing added and a proper stable built to replace the original barn. Their herd multiplied, as did their reputation for fairness and quality, drawing buyers from as far as Denver and beyond. Vivian never forgot the hard lessons of her past, the fire that took her father, the struggle to rebuild, the confrontation with Kessler. These experiences had shaped her into a woman of remarkable strength and compassion, qualities she strove to instill in her children. Vaughn, too, carried the memories of his own losses, but found that each year with Vivian and their children layered joy over old sorrows, until they became merely the foundation upon which their happiness was built, rather than wounds that continued to pain him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vaughn surprised Vivian with a gift that brought her to tears: a piano, delivered all the way from Boston, to replace the one lost in the fire that had claimed her childhood home. "How did you manage this?" she asked in amazement, running her fingers reverently over the polished wood. "I have my ways," Vaughn replied with a mysterious smile. "Besides, I thought it was time our children learned to play, just as your mother taught you." As Vivian sat at the instrument, tentatively playing melodies long dormant but not forgotten, She glanced around at the life they had created together, their children gathered close, their home warm and secure, their land productive and thriving. From the darkest moment of her life had come this abundance, this fullness of days and love. Was it worth it? Vaughn asked quietly, coming to sit beside her on the piano bench. Starting over when you'd lost everything. Vivian's hand stilled on the keys as she turned to meet his gaze, still as blue and steady as the day they'd met. "With you, always," she replied, her voice soft but certain. "It turns out that having everything isn't about possessions or even land. It's about this, what we've built together." Vaughn's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her close. "A wise woman once told me that this town takes everything from you," he mused. "I think she was wrong." "Oh," Vivian raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips. "It doesn't take," Vaughn corrected. "It exchanges. What looks like loss is sometimes just the clearing of space for something better to grow." As the evening sun cast long shadows through the windows, illuminating their children's laughing faces and the home they had built from nothing but determination and love, Vivian knew he was right. She had indeed lost everything once, but in that loss, she had found the courage to reach for something infinitely more precious. And as Vaughn had promised on that fateful day in Aspen so many years ago, starting over with him had been enough. More than enough. It had been everything.